Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, where we talk with key spokespeople in the logistics industry about topical issues. Hosted by Peter McLeod, editor of Logistics Business magazine.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to this very special edition of the Logistics Business Conversations podcast called Supply Chains, Evolving Risks and the Path to Resilience. Today, we're joined by a true heavy hitter from the logistics sector, none other than Saul Reznik, the CEO of UK and Ireland of global contract logistics giant DHL Supply Chain. And together, we will be exploring the strategic landscape of supply chain risk and resilience in the UK market. Hello, Saul, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Peter. Nice to be with you, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. Now, we talk about risk in the supply chain. Generally speaking, where are those risks coming from in your experience?
There's definitely a number of angles that one could look at from concerning where the risk is at the moment. I mean, if you look at it from a macroeconomic point of view and a geopolitical point of view, we've clearly got a number of events happening worldwide, well-publicized territorial disputes and wars happening in parts of the world which are clearly having an impact on global supply chains and will continue, I suspect, for the foreseeable future. Then there is, macroeconomic uncertainty that comes with election changes, which we've just seen recently in the UK, and pending budget reviews coming up in the end of this week, as well as what will or won't happen from an election point of view in North America, which clearly has an influence on global supply chains. And then, I suppose, the other factors of risk, which probably a little bit more localized from a cybersecurity point of view. Well, I shouldn't say localized; they're affecting all companies, but they're more specific to companies that trade like we do, global trading. We've also got the impact of demand and consumer confidence from a demand point of view, and what changes we're seeing from a economic perspective in the multiple shifts that we've seen over the last number of years between omni-channel, e-com channels, and volumes moving up and down, and demand going up and down. So it's quite hard to pinpoint one in specific, but there certainly are a number of challenges which affect organizations that use 3PL logistic companies like ourselves.
Well, I'm looking forward to maybe exploring one or two of those in a little while. I just wondered at this point, can I drop the B-bomb? Is Brexit still a factor in today's business climate?
I think less so than certainly it was a couple of years ago. Most organizations have pivoted to where they need to be in terms of dealing with the impacts of Brexit. I think certainly when Brexit was first came into effect, we did see some organizations struggle in terms of making sure that they understood what it meant for them. But post that, I think most organizations are well aligned. They understand how they have to trade with European partners or outside of the EU, as it may happen. And we're not seeing any direct complications that are happening in our space as a result of it. Not at the moment.
And one of the areas you discussed or you introduced a little while ago was the changing of consumer behaviours. For example, we talked about omni-channel. So how is that being addressed by businesses? And how is DHL Supply Chain helping those businesses to steer a path through those changes?
Yeah, it's a very, very topical point, because a number of companies, what we saw happen at the time, specifically during COVID and the peak of COVID, a number of organizations had pivoted to become, if not entirely reliant on e-com trade, significantly more reliant on e-com trade than they had been prior to COVID. I suppose in hindsight, it's easy to question, but at the time there was a lot of views, or many views within multinational organizations, that would be the way forward in terms of the percentage of trade that was being experienced from an e-com perspective would be the way forward, and it would only continue on that basis. And what we have seen is somewhat of a leveling off of e-com demand, perhaps also fueled by consumer demand softening over the last year or two, as consumer confidence has been impacted in Western geographies and indeed in China. And what that has meant is that what organizations did at the time of COVID is that they built their capacity up from a supply chain perspective to meet an ever-increasing demand of e-com volumes. So if one considers, and this is some data that we've been privy to, which shows that using averages around 6% of trade prior to COVID would have been on an e-commerce basis. That would have moved up to around about 24-25% during COVID. The expectation that would continue beyond, at some level beyond 25%. What we're seeing is that number, whilst it hasn't come back to the pre-COVID levels of 6%, is certainly not anywhere near the 25% numbers as we saw in the peak of COVID. So organizations that built facilities and scaled up to the level that they thought would be the future growth, there's a scenarios now where we're seeing organizations, a number of them, who built significantly larger facilities than they required. The supply is just greater than the demand for their services. And they are now looking at organizations like us as to how can we help them, remove that space or reduce their space from their balance sheets and utilize the space as efficiently as possible. And then secondly, there are organizations that, whilst they may not have made capital commitments to invest in space, like the examples that I said, they certainly get up their business to expect demand at the level that it was before. And that's no longer happening. And now they're looking at companies like us to say, well, we need a more scalable and flexible solution that can scale both up and down. And organizations like DHL with significant capacity globally and in my remit in the UK and I are primed to offer assistance to these organizations that we can help your growing and decreasing demands as it depends when it happens, because of our size and flexibility and multi-user type environments using automation as well as manual type solutions to help overcome these jumps and dips.
I guess I'm a typical consumer in as much as sort of pre-COVID, I used to buy a few things online. During and post-COVID, I seem to buy the majority of my things online. But not only have I increased the volume of goods ordered through e-commerce, I also want them sooner. So again, there's another challenge coming there for businesses, getting stuff out of the door and getting it to the front door of the consumer. Again, sort of what have you seen in those areas? What are the trends and how have you seen businesses overcome those challenges?
Well, I think the industry, and I'll speak specifically in the UK, the industry is well geared to be able to meet the consumer expectation in terms of same day or next business day delivery of products ordered online. That's not really the issue. I think we were almost there before COVID, but we're certainly there and have been for some period of time now. The question we're being asked more is, well, do we need to pay for that? Is there a way we can still service our customers at an acceptable level, which maybe doesn't require next business day perhaps, or same business days kind of service, and in a way that can give us a little bit more flexibility in our costing so that we're not paying for the premium service when perhaps a service that's just below premium would suffice in a number of circumstances. It's giving customers optionality and flexibility, which is, I think, what they're asking for when we talk to them. It's an element of a horses for courses type strategy. We'll build those organizations which will be very cost sensitive, and obviously those with higher price purchasing, higher priced products and very stable and increasing demand, perhaps less so.
I've been in this industry or writing about it for 20 odd years or so. And 20 years ago, logistics players were complaining about how tight margins were. And I think if they sort of projected 20 years forward and saw how tight margins are today, they would probably not have complained so much. There's a balance to how lean an operation can be run before its supply chain starts getting creaky. How, again, can DHL help to sort of manage that balance and keep the businesses able to fulfill promises to their customers whilst at the same time operate at maximum leanness?
It's a very valid point. And I think what we have seen is that first and foremost, an organization like ours, I think this is where we really spend most of our time, is focused on customer centricity. What is happening in the market? We're a great bellwether because not only do we get to see what's happening in the UK, but we're a global organization. So we get to see what's happening in all developed markets across the globe, in all developing markets, I should say as well. So we understand the trends, we understand the impact, we understand the delays in shipping, we understand the cost impacts that happen when you have a war and the Red Sea is blocked, and what the cost of moving containers east, west, west, east is, etc. So where we are in a prime position and have been in a prime position to help organizations there, we understand what's coming so we can build our supply chains and our stock levels and your stock levels with our support to the right levels, not to increase levels or to decrease levels, but to the right levels, working very closely with a customer mindset at the top of our minds. Too often, and I see it from an industry perspective, organizations are very internally focused. And it's all about how the customer or how the market conditions can impact them positively or negatively and how they deal with that. Our mindset is if we build with our customers and we involve and we empower our customers to do as well as they possibly can, using our skills, capability, expertise, and flexibility, then they're more likely to be partners with us for the long term, not just nationally or local or regionally, but globally. And we're seeing that even more so now in the UK. A lot of our competitors are in a position where there's so much industry consolidation happening in companies, this organization being bought out and then another organization being bought out. And, the first acquisition hasn't been properly bedded down and there's already a second acquisition being talked about or happening. And then before you know it, that organization's being, the holding one is being looked as a target for itself. And our logic is, well, that can't be great from a customer's perspective, because if the organizations, and in these cases our competitors, are so focused on what's happening to their structures and their corporate structures, how are they focusing on what the customer actually needs? So our attention is all about what does the customer need, and that's what we're working so hard on. And we've had some tremendous go-lives, most recently with Sephora, which is quite well publicized, where very short time frames, quite high levels of complexity, and it's just working incredibly closely with them as an example, but many other customers are simultaneously ensuring that we meet their customer expectation at the price levels that we've committed to from day one. And if we're doing our job well, then invariably no one will be talking about us. Our names won't be heard because we're just doing our jobs as we should be doing. And that's what I aim for as CEO of the UK region for DHL, is make sure that we're not spoken about. And when we are spoken about, it's only in positive terms. It's never about DHL dropped the ball on this, DHL dropped the ball on that. And the only way we can ensure we do that is having an absolute focus on what our customers' needs and demands are, not just for today, but for the next month and beyond as well.
I've always considered that a bit of a curse of the industry, the fact that it's invisible. And, it's the acid test is, my mum still didn't know what I did to the day she died when I mentioned the logistics to her. And as you say, it's probably just as well, because she's never had a bad experience of logistics in her life. Bless her. What I wanted to talk about, you said the customer, you have to give the customer what they want. And what they want is repeatability, visibility. I would say that digitization of industry probably plays has a greater effect on logistics than it does in any other industry sector. Would you say that's the case? And also, does digitization of logistics bring greater opportunities for businesses as well?
Absolutely. I'll jump onto that question now, Peter, but just your last point about it's a curse. The supply chain, the invisibility of the nature of the work that we do can be a curse only when it gets underestimated to the complexity that we manage. And what we see sometimes is that because it works seamlessly and because we do a great job, it's when a local hero comes in and offers the same services at a significantly reduced cost, and that seems attractive. Well, we don't hear any noise about this. This can't be that complicated. And then moves to the provider. That's when organizations generally will suffer, because they see that it's actually a lot more complex than what we give credit for, or that is given credit for. And when the low-cost provider can't do the services as required, that's when perhaps our value is best felt, because then they see what they were getting. But moving to your next point about digitalization, it's something that we've embraced as in our strategy. Our previous strategy, which was aimed at 2025, was all about making digitalization part of our owning tomorrow, about how we would work towards the future using technology and automation, digitalization as a general concept to enhance our supply chains. Right now, our strategy for 2030 is about making sure that digitalization is just very much about our operational excellence. It's not something that we're looking to do in the future. It's something that we're currently doing and will continue to do more of. It's just a way of doing business for us, almost like a hygiene factor. And that can be from automation in robotics in warehouses. It can also be from using artificial intelligence and technology, using bots wherever we can in terms of our enhancing and streamlining our processes. So it permeates throughout the business that we operate in, and also works in favor with our customers, or in hand in glove with our customers, to make sure that the solutions we put into place for them are future-proof as much as possible, future-proofing their businesses as much as possible, where we can predictably understand our cost base for years to come, and understand also the simplicity that using the right use of automation technology can bring to a supply chain. Used incorrectly, and perhaps with too much haste and not enough planning, technology can also be a big challenge for organizations if done inappropriately and, as I said, too quickly, and cause great cost and disruption to organizations. So it's about ensuring that the companies that you work with as an outsourced provider have done their due diligence, have worked through the good, the bad, and the indifferent of what the technology can bring, and has experience in implementing complex situations, because that's probably where maybe not enough due diligence takes place in ensuring that the right partners are chosen to implement these kinds of highly complex systems in place.
And some of those highly complex systems would involve track and trace type technologies. How important is visibility up and down the supply chain for your customers?
Yeah, I think track and trace is probably something that people would have come to expect some years back already. But what track and trace has evolved to is in full visibility across the entire supply chain, not just in final mile delivery, which is historically where certainly the consumer would have their focus on. I ordered my shirt from wherever. Where is it? And I want to track and see that it's on delivery, or it's going to be delivered at between 2 and 4 this afternoon. But our levels of visibility are more about where is the issue, where is the product or the container or the shipment in the supply chain in its entirety. If it's coming from the east, where about? Is it in production, or is it on ship? Is it on road, etc.? What levels of visibility do I have about the inventory levels? How do I make sure that inventory is going to get booked into my system as quickly as possible? What political risks or geopolitical risks or environmental or weather challenges could come into play? If there's going to be a volcano eruption in Northern Europe, will that have an impact on me? And if it does, then what are you going to be able to do about it? So it's not only about having the data, it's also about having the resilience to manage the supply chain around that if one of those eventualities should occur. And then it's also about then understanding all the way through, right until the pick, the pack, the warehouse distribution, all those components before it even gets onto the final mile vehicle. So visibility is absolutely critical, and it's having systems that give visibility not just within a particular market, but from a global control tower perspective, which is clearly something we do a lot of for many of our customers around the world.
And of course, an industry such as logistics is, shall we say, produces quite a lot of data, would be, I think, a fair comment. And that would also lend itself well to the application of AI. So I'm thinking in a business such as yours, the data sources you'll be drawing on would be, as you said, sort of climatic and weather related, but also traffic, but also tap into demand planning. And we could talk about, seasonal peaks. The list goes on. Pull all those strands together. Does AI play a part in your business? And if so, where is it helping from a customer's perspective to make a difference?
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, the levels of data that we see and have visibility and access to it's significant. So we are consistently developing our AI tools within all our divisions within Deutsche Post or DHL Group, but specifically in our group as well, in DHL Supply Chain, in our team, business unit. It's coming to play in multiple impacts, whether that's about from a documentation point of view, how we use AI to streamline our processes, our contracts, our contracting and all other aspects around that. But then also from a visibility point of view, from an inventory levels point of view, from a predictability point of view, all those points that you raised on, which are quite right, where AI can help us and where it will help us. It's not just about using AI for the sake of saying we're using AI, but it's about making sure that it actually has value and can deliver benefit to our customers and to ourselves. And I'm often prone to ask our people when presented on something, just because it looks flash and the latest trend, whatever you want to call it. The question is, so what? So what will that do for us? What will that do for our customer? Has it got a practical application for us? And if so, then how do we make that real, scalable, and make sure that can happen quickly? And that's where our focus is. And we're doing extensive work in that area, again, across the globe with our centers of excellence, specifically focused on AI.
Partly as a result of my background in marketing, I do get the expressions challenge and opportunity mixed up. And I'm going to apply that to sustainability. It is both challenging for businesses, plus it represents an extraordinary opportunity to streamline and eliminate carbon. Other areas in which DHL supply chain can partner with their customers or assist their customers to reduce their impact on the environment?
Absolutely. Again, it's one of our strong bows to our arm at the moment, where we're working very closely with a number of customers. We've had some publicly announced. I think Tesco in Ireland was one example where we've partnered with them using biogas as a solution with LNG vehicles. Likewise, in the UK, we've committed to purchasing a number of biogas vehicles for that specific purpose. We've also gone down the route of electric vehicles for not just for the short-haul vans, which most people would see and are familiar with, but for heavy goods vehicles for longer range deliveries. So we are working extensively on that. We recognize that it's not there's no one silver bullet at the moment. Hydrogen is spoken of a lot, and we're working on where we can have hydrogen as a great application here in the UK. But, electric is not where it needs to be right now, not necessarily only from a supply of vehicles, but also from a supply of infrastructure within the country to meet the charging and network demands that would bring. So therefore, we have to find a balance whether using CNG vehicles, LNG vehicles, HVO as an option, which may not be the end game, but it goes some way in reducing the carbon emissions that organizations will emit. So we're working in partnership with a number of companies, a number of blue chips who, similarly to DHL, have signed up to science-based targets and are determined to reduce their emissions over the period of time. DHL was one of the first organizations to commit to a zero emissions target some time back already, and we're on track to meeting those expectations and demands, and we want to take our partners along with us for the journey, because we recognize this is something that impacts all of us, not just certain players in the industry. Transport is clearly a big emitter, and vehicles on the road are a big portion of that. So we have to make sure that we do our part to have the technologies available that we can, together with our customers, come up with solutions. So I agree that it's a challenge, but it's a challenge for all. I think it's an opportunity for those who embrace it first and at pace, because, mostly because of scarcity, actually, not from an opportunistic point of view, from a financial perspective, but getting involved. There's only limited amounts of, as I mentioned, HVO. There's not an infinite supply of that. There's not only limited amounts of technology available from an electric charging stations perspective and from battery electric vehicles. So having access to those technologies, or having access to that capacity, is critical to that success. And I believe we're well placed because, we're the biggest logistics organization in the world, and we're putting our money where our mouth is, where we have to. But we're also partnering with partners who share similar views to ours. So, yeah, quite right about the opportunity.
So if, for example, I was running an operation that relied on a certain technology or piece of technology, and a component on that technology failed, which meant my business was likely to shut down, I would want that part sent from, for example, Japan in the fastest, possibly least ecological way. If I was a regular customer that wanted stuff sent from A to B, is it possible to choose a more more ecologically friendly solution, for example, via a ship rather than an aeroplane, or can you put it on an electric vehicle rather than a diesel vehicle for the last mile? Do you offer that option for your customers?
Yes, we do, but not necessarily specific to the supply chain organization, which is mostly around for physical fulfillment and distribution in a country or region, not so much in the global movement between countries and regions. But obviously our sister companies, DHL Express and DHL Global Forwarding and DHL E-commerce, do a lot of that, where companies and customers can elect to, whether it's by using sustainable aviation fuel, whichever means is available to them, to elect to choose something which is more environmentally efficient. From our perspective, most of those choices are more about the company, because most of our business, albeit the e-com trade is big, it's still on a B2B basis. So most of those decisions reside with the customers that we have, which will be businesses, whether they're global multinationals or local companies, whichever may it be. And they will then have the option to work with us on finding more environmental solutions for their transport methodologies. When it comes to the warehousing of goods, we've almost taken that decision away from anybody, because we made a commitment some time back that all new facilities we build and all extensions of leases that we enter into are done in facilities where the building will be carbon neutral. So, the product is stored in an environment which is carbon neutrality, and we will continue to go down that path, because we wouldn't be investing in infrastructure going forward that doesn't meet that expectation.
Saul, as we reach the end of our conversation, I have some questions from readers here, and I'm happy to say that during the course of our chat, you've answered pretty much all of them. There is one here at the end that I'm going to ask you, because it very much connects with what you've just been saying regarding sustainability. And I'll read the question to you in full. As a clothing brand focused on sustainability, we're struggling to balance eco-friendly practices with costs. What advice would you give to make our supply chain greener, and are there any strategies that could help reduce emissions without hurting our bottom line? So that's very much cost versus being a good member of society.
Yeah, and I think that's a question that challenges a number of entities. It's not straightforward. It'd be lovely to say, choose option A as opposed to B, because that'll meet your expectations at a reduced cost. The reality is now, whilst capacity is scarce, and that's what I touched on a little bit earlier, the capacity for greener solutions is scarce. Cost is going to, these services will come at a premium. That's just an unfortunate reality. But what we are seeing, and we really are seeing good signs of this, is that in certain areas, whether that be HVO or in some form of biogas type solutions, costs are coming down because supply is becoming more readily available. And that's like any marketplace. I mean, if you go back 30 years ago or 50 years ago, I don't know what a calculator cost then in real terms today, but it would significantly more than what it does today. It's likewise with phones, the first generations, etc. So the same thing's happening here. I think people recognize that going forward, fossil fuel type supply chains, or supply chains powered by fossil fuel, are not the way of the future, and supply chains fueled by carbon neutral solutions are the way. So supply will become more readily available, and that will hopefully drive costs down as time evolves. My advice to this particular writer or correspondent of yours is to say that, partner with an organization that can meet your demands, that understands where you want to go and has got a plan to work with you to reduce your costs, but ensure that you can not just tick a sustainability box, but that you can actually meaningfully drive your carbon emissions down. And unfortunately for some, and it's going to be the hard news to hear, is that you will need scale as a partner to be able to do that, because, to buy up supply and to have the capacity to meet these growing demands is not something that is just readily available to all companies out there. So I'm obviously delighted that a company like DHL has that, but there are not many who do have that ability to influence the market and to make sure that they can meet the expectations of customers like the one who's communicated with you there.
Well, Saul, it's been a fascinating chat. I've really enjoyed talking with you today. Unfortunately, we are reaching the end of our allotted time. So it just remains for me to say a really big thank you for slotting us into your busy schedule today, Saul.
It's my absolute pleasure, Peter. And I've enjoyed talking with you, and I look forward to hopefully doing so in the future again.
And thank you, as always, to you, the listener, for joining us today for this special edition of Logistics Business Conversations. Remember, wherever you get your podcasts from, please subscribe to the Logistics Business Conversations to make sure that the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Saul.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, Saul Reznik, DHL. Been my pleasure being with you today, and thanks so much for listening.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter McLeod. Goodbye.